In the infinite silence of Sector 73Z, beyond the reach of any comm relay, the Orrery Prime glided through the void. It was the largest exploratory vessel built by the Union of Solar Systems, designed for one purpose: uncover what lay forgotten beyond the mapped galaxies. Its crew, 13 elite members trained in xenobiology, ancient tech archaeology, and extreme survival, were now descending into orbit around Arcturus IX, a frozen moon no longer marked on modern star maps. As the shuttle Echo Lumen detached from the mothership, its descent was met with electromagnetic silence. No signal, no resistance, just the gentle hum of fusion jets against the icy vacuum. Beneath them stretched a landscape like broken glass, jagged mountains jutting from oceans sealed in time. But the real mystery was below, where radar had pinged something artificial buried beneath a collapsed glacier. Captain Rhea Voss, a decorated veteran of the Titan Wars, sat motionless in the cockpit, her eyes fixed on the cavern's mouth. Her voice, calm yet braced with tension, echoed through the comms. Initiate subsurface scan. There's something here, something layered. Not just metal, but organic latticework. Dr. Kieran Soul, linguist and xenoarchaeologist, whispered from the rear of the cabin, this isn't just a structure. It's a construct, a vessel within the moon itself. The shuttle landed with a muted hiss. Snow crystals danced and fell. The entry to the base, a blackened corridor of hexagonal ribs, gaped before them like the maw of a forgotten beast. With every step forward, lights pulsed faintly, reacting to their biosigns. Symbols, not language, not quite, rippled across the walls in bioluminescent arcs. It's responding to us, Kieran muttered. Or watching. The corridor led to a vast antechamber, domed and alive with motionless machinery. Floating platforms. Coiled cables that twitched like sleeping serpents. The team's helmets fogged as temperatures stabilized, oddly Earth-like. A sound faint like breathing began to echo faintly, although no one was breathing heavy. Voss froze. Everyone halt. Listen. The breathing stopped. A central obelisk rose from the floor, silent but emanating heat. A console with hand-shaped grooves. This wasn't abandoned, Soul whispered. It was waiting. They had found the gateway to something ancient, buried not by accident, but by purpose. And now it knew they had arrived. As the camera on Voss's suit blinked red, recording corruption detected, the obelisk pulsed once, like a heartbeat. Then the door behind them closed. The moment the door sealed behind them, the silence changed. It was no longer passive. It pressed against their suits, a silence that felt like weight, a pressure in the ears and chest. Something ancient stirred behind the walls, like the deep shifting of tectonic plates beneath flesh. Captain Voss raised her wrist scanner. No anomalies, but her instincts flared. We keep formation. Record everything. Don't touch anything until we understand what this is. But the base responded first. The floor beneath their boots illuminated, a pulsing path of dim amber light extending from the obelisk toward a side corridor. Along the walls, glyphs shimmered again, no longer random. They moved in patterns, converging into shapes, spirals, hands, and what looked like human faces, fractured and stretched unnaturally. It's guiding us, Soul said, or replacing fear. It's sentient, maybe even conscious. A machine mind, but dreaming. Technician Morrow, holding a grav camera rig, stepped closer to the obelisk. No EM output, but there's something. I can feel it in my skull. It's like... He stopped. Eyes wide. His nose began to bleed. Back away. Voss barked. Two crewmates pulled him back, laying him down as his eyes rolled up for a second, then cleared. It showed me something, he whispered. A corridor. Endless, but alive. Breathing. And something at the center, in chains. Screaming, but the sound was reverse. Like it was screaming backward. The room trembled slightly. Dust fell from the high ceilings. Then the obelisk turned, not physically, but perceptually. The entire chamber shifted. The far wall dissolved into transparency, revealing a circular room with vertical shafts descending into blackness. Inside the void, floating just below visibility, were spheres like stars trapped underwater. This is a consciousness archive, said Soul, breathless. They didn't store knowledge in books. They stored minds. Voss motioned. We move. Slow. Soul, you stay with me. Sensors out. Helmets sealed. The team entered the circular room. As they passed between the glowing spheres, whispers began to flicker in their comms. Garbled at first, then forming words. STBNOFUR. The message looped, voice static-rich and strained. Male, female, hard to tell. Echoing from every direction and none. Soul's face turned pale. They're They're still in there. The architects. Trapped consciousnesses. They locked themselves in. A sudden pulse from the obelisk behind them. Voss turned, but now the door had changed. It showed a star chart. A system not on their maps. Coordinates. It's giving us something, she said. But then came the real message. On the far wall, projected from unseen points, emerged a holographic form, tall, thin, with elongated arms and a segmented crown-like skull. It stood motionless for several seconds, then raised a hand in warning. From its chest projected an image, a human figure, their own species reaching toward something and then screaming as they were torn apart by unseen strands of light. They warned us, Sol murmured. Whatever happened here, they built this tomb not to preserve themselves, but to contain what they found. In that moment, the lights cut out. Only the orbs remained lit. Each one now throbbed with color. Red. One by one. The base wasn't just awake. It was watching them now. And it remembered what woke it last time. The red pulses from the orbs were rhythmic now. Not just a warning, but a message encoded in light. They blinked in trios, in rapid patterns, like an ancient heartbeat counting down toward some unknowable threshold. Inside her helmet, Captain Voss could hear her own breath quickening. Not fear, not yet, but a profound awareness that the line between exploration and trespass had already been crossed. And there was no turning back. Back to the main chamber, she commanded, her voice steady but sharp. We regroup. Now. The team moved quickly, flashlights flickering as the base began to react in real time. The floors breathing underfoot, seams in the metal pulsing faintly like veins. As they passed beneath a curving archway, it closed behind them, seamlessly sealing with no visible mechanics. We're being herded, Morrow said, sweat clinging to the inside of his visor. Dr. Sol remained oddly calm. No, not herded. Shown something. It wants us to see. The obelisk was gone. In its place now stood a spiral column of glass, and inside it, suspended in violet light, a human figure. Female. Pale, unblinking, untouched by time. That's impossible, whispered Elra, the team's exobiologist. That's a human. That's our biology. Scans confirmed it. DNA, 100% match. And yet, the woman's suit bore no known insignia, no record of her in any interstellar archives. Suddenly, a low tone resonated through the room, vibrating through their bones. The glass column split open vertically with a hiss of pale gas. The woman inside fell forward, but didn't collapse. She floated, hovering inches from the floor. Her eyes opened. They were white. Entirely. But they moved with awareness. She opened her mouth not to speak, but to emit sound. A chorus of tones like harmonic frequencies folding into language. We broke it open. Her voice came not from her mouth, but through every comms channel simultaneously, old, deep, layered with sorrow. We tried to hold it. Earn time to trap it. Then seal the gate. Sol stepped forward, voice shaking. Who are you? I was the key, she said. They made me to speak the lock into being. But time folds. You came too early. Or too late. The orbit drifted. The stars misaligned. She extended her arm, pointing down a dark corridor that hadn't existed minutes ago. Now you must witness what remains. The corridor was bone white. Unlike the rest of the base, it was smooth, devoid of cables, glyphs, or machines. As they walked, the air grew warm. Moist. Like the inside of a living creature. And then they saw it. A chamber, vast and spherical, its walls organic, fibrous, pulsating. In the center floated a singularity engine, a miniature black hole suspended in a magnetic cradle ringed by alien tech. Around it were husks. Not corpses, but burnt impressions of figures as though they had been erased from matter itself. The woman floated to the center and stood beside the engine. They made it to fold reality. To escape what came from the gap between stars. What came? Voss asked. The woman turned. It had no name, but it wanted form. Thought. Suffering. It could only exist inside minds. So it wore them like skin. You imprisoned it? Sol whispered. No. We failed. We only slowed it. I am its ward. But your arrival has fed it. She turned back to the engine. Her form began to disintegrate slowly like ash drifting upward. Go, she said, her voice now fading. It knows you now. The walls shook violently. Captain. Movement. Behind us. Down the corridor, a wave of black fluid surged, not liquid, but a swarm of nano-organic tendrils. It moved with purpose, aware, folding into shapes that mimicked the human form, their faces, their voices. Echoes of the crew. Fall back. Seal the chamber. Voss shouted. They ran, sealing the bone-white corridor with emergency explosives. The shockwave threw them to the floor. When they looked up, the column was shattered. The woman was gone. The obelisk stood once more, flickering, damaged. And on its surface now appeared one word, in their language, clear and cold. Hungry. They ran, not out of fear, but instinct. The kind of primal urgency embedded in evolution long before humanity left Earth's cradle. The kind of run where the silence of space felt louder than the screams in their helmets. Behind them, the swarm surged, pouring out of the bone corridor like ink in water. It didn't touch the walls. It flowed around them, aware of its architecture, aware of itself. Inside the command core of the alien base, the environment changed again. The surfaces began to ripple like liquid glass, and the air shimmered with heat. A voice echoed, not the woman's, not anything human. You bring memory. You bring thought. I am what you remember when you forget the stars. Voss raised her plasma rifle, knowing it was worthless. What the hell is it saying? She demanded. Sol stood still, eyes distant, entranced. It's not speaking to us. It's speaking through us. Clarify, she barked. He turned. His voice was no longer his. It needed a mind to enter. One mind to fracture the lock. You opened the seal by naming what should not be known. Sol collapsed. The swarm halted inches from his body. Then it began to retreat as if it had found what it wanted. Morrow moved to check on Sol, but Voss blocked him. No. We don't know what's inside him now. Suddenly, the environment shifted. Light collapsed. Space twisted inward. They were no longer in the base, or rather, they were, but its dimensions were gone. They floated now inside a fractal sphere, infinite halls looping in impossible directions, mirrors that didn't reflect them but older versions of themselves. Childlike. Scarred. Deformed. Dead. What is this? Whispered Elra. A simulation, Voss replied, or a trap. Sol rose. His face flickered, switching between his own and a dozen others, male and female, alien and unknown. A stream of symbols poured from his mouth like smoke. The voice spoke again. You are a seed. I consume memory. I rewrite origin. Thought is a signal. I am the silence between thoughts. All at once, each member of the crew began to hear something different, their own voices speaking to them. Morrow heard his dead brother calling from beneath ice. Elra saw her childhood dog walk through the walls. Voss felt the grip of her father's hand, decades dead, on her shoulder. It's using our own neurons, Elra gasped, tears welling. Injecting itself, making memories that never happened. Sol levitated, eyes glowing like twin suns. He pointed toward a circular platform now rising from the floor, or rather, forming from pieces of their memories. It looked like the bridge of the Aurora Prime, but wrong. Warped. On its control deck was a sphere, not black, not metal. Organic. Alive. Pulsing with a red inner light. That's its anchor, Voss realized. That's how it's holding this construct together. She turned to her team. You see it now. It doesn't live here. It lives in thought. In architecture built by intelligence. The more we understand it, the stronger it gets. Suddenly, a voice, normal, human, pierced the chaos. From Voss's calm. Captain, do you copy? This is Aurora Prime. We see massive EM output below surface. Do you copy? They froze. That can't be real, whispered Morrow. Comms are dead out here. They said that when we landed. No relays for 17 light years. But the voice continued. Captain, bring the sample. We're ready for extraction. The ship is waiting. It wasn't a rescue. It was bait. Voss closed her eyes. Her memories began to flicker, Earth, the academy, her sister's wedding. And beneath all of it, static. Something threading through her past like a parasite. She opened her eyes and raised her rifle. It wants us to believe the past is a place we can return to. But it's feeding. It lives in nostalgia. In repetition. We have to sever the connection. How? Elra asked, trembling. Voss pointed to the sphere. We destroy the anchor. Sol, or what wore his form, grinned. And the swarm returned, rising like a wall of water behind him. It will cost you your names, the voice said. You will forget yourselves. Voss nodded. Then let it begin. And she fired. Tom stuttered. The plasma round left Voss's rifle at full velocity, yet in that moment, the world slowed to a crawl. Every droplet of sweat hung in midair. The crimson pulse of the anchor ore beat once, then froze. The shot struck the organic sphere, not with the sound of impact, but with the scream of unraveling. The sound didn't register through their ears, but in their teeth, their nerves, in the memory of being born. The orb cracked. It didn't explode. It wept. Thick red fluid bled from its fracture, seeping across the fractured platform like oil, etching glowing patterns into the walls. The illusions shattered. The mirror corridors collapsed. The false images of the Orrery Prime, of lost family and synthetic pasts, blinked out one by one like dying stars. And then the swarm screamed. It wasn't a sound for human perception. It bent light. Helmets glitched. The artificial gravity pulsed like a heartbeat, slamming the crew to their knees. The entity, no longer hidden, was now visible. A shape born of shadows and shifting geometry. No edges. No core. Just a suggestion of form, impossible to resolve. It flickered between humanoid silhouettes and alien constructs, wings, claws, mouths that never opened yet devoured light. Soul's body twitched violently. He rose into the air, held not by will but by threads of black light that had sunk into his flesh. "Stop her," it said through him, "before the breach collapses." "There's nothing left to stop," Voss answered, eyes locked on the crumbling anchor. "You existed because we observed you. Because you infected memory. But we severed the source." The base itself began to fall apart. Not crumble, disassemble. Entire walls folded inward, dissolving into data, into noise. The central platform began to descend on a glowing beam of unfiltered gravitational energy, dropping them into the true heart of the base. They descended into silence. Into origin. The chamber was the size of a planet's core, yet fit within the impossible space of the base. Stars floated in its ceiling like reflections on water. And in the center, the breach. A wound in reality, jagged, black, rimmed with blue fire. It pulsed like a heartbeat, but backwards. "That's where it came from," whispered Elra. "That's what they tried to seal." Below them floated a ring of obsidian pylons, each etched in alien runes, orbiting the breach like guardians. Only one remained active. They used themselves as seals, Voss realized. Consciousness was the lock. The final pylon blinked, its glyphs fading. Then Soul screamed, not in pain, but resistance. His own voice broke through. "It's inside me, trying to fold me into its pattern. Kill me. End this. Please." The swarm surged upward again, coalescing into a vast construct of wings and limbs and shrieking mouths. Voss aimed not at Soul, but at the last pylon. "I can't kill you, Soul. But I can finish what they started." "Do it," he cried. The shot struck the pylon, and with it the entire base trembled as though struck by a celestial hammer. The breach screamed. Reality tore open again, not to release, but to absorb. The entity, the swarm, even the malformed versions of the crew that flickered in and out of phase, all were pulled toward the breach. Soul was the last to go. He smiled. "Tell them we were too curious." He vanished into the light. Then silence. The chamber dimmed. The stars above faded. The breach sealed. Its edges calcified, became stone, then crystal, then nothing. The floor reformed. The base, or what remained, was now inert. Cold. Just a tomb again. "Status?" Voss asked through the static-filled comms. Elra's voice cracked through. "Alive. Mostly. I think it's over." "No," Voss said. "It's sleeping again. Let's make sure it never wakes." In the core's center, an old console blinked to life, real this time. Union Tech. Their tech. Somehow, their future selves had already been here. "Captain," Elra said, her voice trembling. "This isn't a discovery. It's a loop." Voss looked down at her rifle. The barrel was inscribed with something she'd never seen before. A name. Her own. Carved centuries ago. It was always us. Darkness. Still. No hum of power. No breach. No voices. Just the dull sound of breath inside sealed helmets. And the distant echo of boots stepping cautiously across a floor that now felt familiar. The chamber, once alive, radiant with alien intelligence, was now gray. Dust settled in fine layers like forgotten snowfall. The breach was gone. So was the swarm, the anchor, and the ghostly woman who claimed to be the key. But nothing felt resolved. Captain Voss stood at the edge of a broken dais, staring into the void where the pylon ring had orbited. Elra stood beside her, holding a scanner with a flickering screen. "Energy signatures dropping," Elra said. "Residual spatial distortion, but no EM fields, no organic tech signals. It's like the entire base exhaled. Or died," Voss murmured. She turned, motioning the surviving team, Elra, Morrow, and technician Lien, to follow her through a collapsing corridor. No longer alive, the base began to decay around them. Walls cracked. Gravity shifted in brief jolts. Light bled from the seams, leaking red glow fragments like dying neurons. As they reached the upper tier, they entered a rotunda they hadn't seen before. Unlike the others, this one was human-made. Built of earth alloys. Marked with Union of Solar Systems insignia. Ancient, rusted, dust-covered. How the hell, Morrow whispered. No. That's impossible, said Lien. This is our architecture. From before we launched Orrery Prime. Decades before. Etched into the metal wall was a serial number. Voss stepped forward, brushing off the dust. USS Research Outpost X-13 lost, 2273. She backed away slowly. This mission was classified and erased. The first attempt to explore Arcturus IX. They said it failed, never returned. Elra knelt near the corner. A skeletal hand reached from beneath rubble, clutching a helmet. One identical to their own. Inside the helmet, a data drive blinked red. Lien plugged it into his wrist port. It flickered to life, projecting a log. Cycle 39 log, Commander Ria Voss recording. Her own voice. Older. Rougher. Echoing from decades or centuries past or future. If you're hearing this, you're in the loop. We couldn't stop it. We sealed the breach again, but time reformed around it. Memory recycles. The entity is time. It wears it. We're not explorers. We're keys. Reused. Rewritten. It won't let us go. How can this be real? Elra gasped. Because the seal was built from cognition, Voss replied, numb. It doesn't just trap space, it bends causality. Every time someone comes here, they trigger it again. It makes sure they return. Suddenly, the room shifted. The metal walls dissolved into a starlit dome. The earth hung in the sky above, but cracked. Glowing red veins stretched across continents like wounds. The moon drifted in pieces, orbiting a corpse. It's showing us the end, Morrow whispered. One possible future. No, Voss said grimly. The original future. Before they trapped it. And then they saw them. Dozens of explorers. Human. Alien. Synthetic. All gathered in a circular field. Trapped in mid-motion, some screaming, some kneeling, others raising weapons or prayer. All frozen. Statues made of ash and memory. This is what the base feeds on, Elra said. Not just curiosity. Not just fear. The pattern of sacrifice. The willingness to loop forever. Thinking this time we'll win. Above them, the starlit dome began to crack. Darkness seeped in like oil. Elra turned to Voss. How many times have we done this? Voss walked to the center of the ash circle. She knelt, reached into the dust, and pulled out a broken badge. It bore her name. But it wasn't made of alloy. It was bone. She stood slowly, looking upward into the closing sky. Enough, she whispered. We break the loop by not playing its game. What are you saying? Lien asked. We don't fight it. We don't seal it. We don't try to remember or understand it. She looked at her team, faces worn, eyes flickering with fear and resolve. We forget it. As if hearing her, the room dimmed again. A final console rose from the ground, not of alien design, but Earth tech, blinking with one option. Cycle abort, engage total memory erasure. Will it kill us? Morrow asked. No, Voss replied. It'll let us live. Just somewhere else. As someone else. With no memory of this. How do you know? She looked at her bone badge. Because we've done it before. Silence wrapped around them like a cocoon. In the center of the memory vault, beneath a broken sky, beside fossilized echoes of themselves, the crew stood before the console. The option blinked. Cycle abort, engage total memory erasure. Warning, cannot be undone. For a long moment, no one moved. Morrow's voice cracked first. If we forget, we lose all of it. The mission. Soul. What he gave. Voss stared at the ash badge in her palm, the shape of her name, eroded by time and loop. She remembered now, the first cycle. The promise they made in silence. We lose nothing, she said softly. We free it. Him. Everyone who's ever been caught here. The console pulsed faster, sensing their presence. Elra nodded. If we remember, the entity remembers. Memory is its oxygen. And forgetting is the suffocation, Lien whispered. Voss stepped forward, fingers over the console. She paused. This isn't escape, she said. This is sacrifice. We're not saving ourselves. We're sealing a door no one else will open again. Morrow placed his hand on hers. Then close it. She pressed the command. Engage. The effect wasn't instant. The base side not with air, but with time itself. The walls folded in on themselves. layer by layer, like pages of a forgotten book returning to the void. Light twisted into darkness, and the floor beneath them melted into stars. They were no longer standing. They were suspended. Each of them floated inside a memory shell, like transparent cocoons of thought. Around them, fragments of identity peeled away like snow in sunlight. Voss saw her childhood dissolve, her sister's laughter, her first time in 0G, her father's song. They broke apart into colors, and then into silence. In front of her, Soul appeared, smiling. Not alive, not dead. Just between. You found the answer, he said. Too late, she replied. He shook his head. No, just in time. The loop isn't broken by destruction. It's broken by silence. And then he vanished, as if he'd never existed at all. The stars faded. All sensations ceased. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, a sunrise. Somewhere distant. Planet unfamiliar, yet warm. A coastal village with metal-woven rooftops and growing vines. Children running through sand under lavender skies. A young woman, with dark hair and quiet eyes, sits by the water watching the sea pulse with tiny lights. Her name is Ria. She's never known war, never known stars, but she sometimes dreams of a red orb breaking apart and wakes with tears she doesn't understand. Elsewhere, in the market, a man named Maro sells carvings of birds he swears he's never seen before. Elra teaches herbal medicine. She hums a tune she cannot place. Lien draws strange constellations on scraps of bark, staring at them for hours with a sense of urgent déjà vu. They never meet. They never remember. But every few years, on the same night, each of them looks up at the stars. And they feel something stir inside them, not a memory, but a whisper. Don't look too deep. Let the silence sleep. Far, far away, beneath the icy crust of a dead moon orbiting Arcturus IX. The base lies dormant. No light. No breath. Just dust. And a closed console. Still blinking.